Hello everyone, welcome back to Spooderpods. Today is my first proper video and I'm going to be talking about jumping spider enclosures, how to set them up, and the question, do you want to go natural or do you want to go themed? Now just to be clear, a lot of these points will apply if you have a little one or a juvenile jumping spider, but I've tailored this video to mainly focus on sub-adults or adult jumping spiders, and mostly from the regal and bold genuses because people like them the most. And I also have a Philippus Regius who's adorable, and he's currently, we think, going into a molt because he's just closed himself up in his web. So yeah, but I thought I would tailor this video to these specific types because they have similar sizing and they're the most popular. So before we go into the differences between a more natural setup or a more sort of thematic one, let's talk about the essentials that any jumping spider enclosure should have. And the most important essential, I think, is an adequate amount of space. These guys love to explore, they love to move around, they really enjoy the full enclosure, so you want to give them plenty of space. You can't sort of skimp on space. Generally, for one of these guys, you want 20 by 15 by 15, and I would say it's kind of a minimum. Other people recommend more, but I've noticed Tank is getting on really well in this enclosure, and he's almost adult now, and he's loving it and enjoying the small space. So do not skimp on space, make sure there's plenty of space there. Again, another essential is substrate, and substrate is really important because it holds moisture. They want a bit of humidity in there, and it's also just, it makes it a bit nicer. I've seen a couple of videos where people don't really have any substrate or use the absolute minimum, and I just feel it doesn't really work. So even if you go natural or themed, a substrate is really useful to have in there. The next one might trip up a few beginners. It almost tripped me up, but I did a lot of research, and that is a clear ceiling space. These guys are arboreal and they also like to build their webs in the top of their enclosure. So generally you want a clear space, and if you can, get a front or side opening enclosure with a space on the top, just so you don't disturb their web when you're opening and shutting it or doing any maintenance, moving stuff around, or even putting food in. Because it's really important that you don't keep destroying their web, because it's no good for them. It could cause them some stress, and if they're in the middle of a molt, it could be potentially quite damaging or disastrous. Again, as I mentioned, they are arboreal, and while they will come to the ground and they'll explore, as a general rule, you want lots of high up options in that enclosure for them. Places they can just sit, sun themselves, relax, explore, just loads of places high up, because that's what they'll do in the wild. Now the last one, a lot of people may say isn't essential, but I think it's really important, and that's a cleanup crew. The best type of cleanup crew, which I'll be talking about in a future video, is springtails. Super easy to look after. You just put them in, put a little bit of leaflet and let them get on with it. They also eat mold, and if you're just starting up with an enclosure, you're setting up, you will get some initially. They will help control that. They will help stay on top of that and just clean up any other messes like your spider's droppings, or if they leave any carcasses behind that you can't find. So generally I think cleanup crew is really helpful, and you don't really need much maintenance. You just need to make sure that the substrate is moist, which you'd want to do anyway, and just occasionally put in a bit of leaf litter for them just to supplement their diet. Now let's talk about the differences between a natural setup or a more thematic setup. With a natural setup, we're talking about something that's quite bioactive, so you have the opportunity to create a bioactive environment. That means things that are all alive. You can have living plants in there, you can have mosses, lichens, all sorts of things growing in there for your spider to explore and enjoy. And arguably I would say this is a slightly better setup because it is more natural. When I talk about parrots on my other channel, we try to provide as many opportunities to express natural behaviours as possible. And while obviously in the home setting that's difficult for a parrot, it's much easier for a spider. You can basically create your own mini environment in there where everything's alive, everything's living, everything's having fun in there. If plants can have fun, you know what I mean, basically. But yeah, that is one of the biggest advantages to doing it this way. So when you're doing an enclosure like this, that means lots of natural branches, it means maybe mosses, as I said, living plants. You want to create basically what you have in the wild. Lots of high up options with loads of branches. There's like little pods you can get, both in small and large sizes. I'll show a bit of footage of our initial setup, which was all natural, which we later changed up purely because of what we wanted to do and because we got a bit over enthusiastic basically. The other sort of benefit of having an all natural setup is arguably it's a lot cheaper, which I'll talk about in the next section. It is cheaper, it's a lot easier to do, and if you're more experienced, you can sort of forage almost for your own materials, provided you disinfect and clean them properly. Now the thematic enclosure. When I talk about thematic enclosures, you may have seen them a lot with tarantulas. There's lots of examples of channels like Snake Discovery and all sorts of places where they have like these themes and settings and setups, which are mostly fun for us, you know. The spider's kind of indifferent to them, it may climb on them, enjoy them, but we love doing it as humans, so it's more fun and generally quite exciting to do. I know I get inspired by that sort of thing because it helps me exercise my creativity in another way, and it's quite enjoyable. Also, with this sort of thing, it's not really doing your spider any harm either. There's nothing really in there that's going to harm them unless you're using unsafe glues, paints, etc. So generally they can just explore it and enjoy it too. Another point that may be up for debate is there's more opportunities for enrichment. You can provide different places to hide out of acrylic, all different sort of things. Tank, for example, loves sitting on his sign, which is actually from natural material, but it's obviously got a Beware the Spood on it, which isn't really a natural thing you'd find in the wild. And he actually loves his stairs. We've noticed he's been sitting on his stairs an awful lot recently and sort of climbing up and down them, sort of feeling them with his feet. So there are opportunities for enrichment from non-natural materials. One downside of going down the thematic route is it is more expensive unless you're really crafty. Even if you have a 3D printer, it's going to cost you a lot more. Natural is generally much cheaper and easier to go with initially, but there are so many things you can get, accessories for spiders and other inverts out there, that will tempt you into going down that route, and that's what happened to us. That's why we ended up with so many bits and pieces in there, because we just saw this stuff and we really wanted to provide it for him, and mostly for us. I think we enjoyed providing it, and actually seeing him interacting, that's kind of rewarding for us too. There is also another way you can do it, and that's going halfway. It doesn't have to be all natural, it doesn't have to be all thematic. You know, you don't have to create a giant spaceship enclosure, or I've seen some like tombs and all sorts of things. You can just go halfway. What we did in the end is we settled on a half natural, half themed sort of enclosure. So we have our natural branches, we obviously have our substrate, which is kind of essential, I'd argue. We have a bit of bioactivity in there with our cleanup crew and some natural mosses growing in there. But we also have our fun things, you know, we have our stairs, we have our little platform, we have our mushroom, we have our sign, and we feel that was the best way to go because we kind of get the best of both worlds there. And we're constantly watching to see what he interacts with, is anything he's finding difficult or anything that may present a danger to him. Because don't forget, again, there's another parrot analogy. Having any sort of animal or insect, be it insect or elephant, it's all a learning experience, and you can learn as you go and adapt your approach. So everyone, thank you very much for watching my first proper video. I hope you found it entertaining and useful. If you do like the channel, please like, comment, subscribe, give another video a watch, it does help, and hopefully I'll see you next time. See you later.